Christian community. I'll describe this for anyone who's just listening to the audio after the fact. I've got an illustration here of a group of people, of figures. They're standing on a slightly raised circular platform, and one of them is reaching down to someone who's not up on the platform yet. What does that say to you? To meet somebody face to face, and it produces more results, doesn't it? Okay, phone calls are good, and we should be doing that. But when we take time to actually get in the car and drive to somebody's house or to a Starbucks or whatever and meet them, it says, you know, you're important enough to me that I'm going to stop all this other stuff I've got to do to carve out some time for you. Okay? Pardon me? Home groups, yes. Another thing, it takes time to go to the home groups. But boy, that's a place where if they're working right, we're opening up and sharing and really finding out about other people. And we can lift them up and we can be lifted up. Okay? How come I gave more points for a meal? Breaking bread is important, yes. In every culture in the world that I know anything about, there is something that happens when we sit down and eat with people. And it's one of the most important things in a family. And unfortunately, in our society today, many families are going in different directions between soccer practice and band camp and working late and going to the grocery store. You've got 4 different people in the family who don't even see each other and sit down to eat together. And it's one of the reasons that there is so much division in so many families. He'd been in churches where there wasn't any fellowship or community happening. It was just Sunday morning, okay? And that left some hurts in him. I think many of us have passed through similar experiences where church was a Sunday morning thing. It was not something that was happening during the week, and community just wasn't there. And I'm so glad that in this church, at least a little bit, we've got some real community happening. I think we can improve, but one of the reasons I'm here instead of someplace else is because I do feel like there are some people here who care about me, okay, and who manage to show it. And that's the whole purpose of my message this morning, is to encourage us all to show it more, okay? All right, Karen, would you go on to the next slide, please? Okay, not too long ago, Harry and I had a conflict on Sunday morning, a soccer game or something, and we couldn't get here at the time of the service. So we decided to go visit another church. I had driven past this particular new building, and it looked interesting. This was not the actual name, but it was something snappy like this, and it was, in fact, a web address. And we got inside. But before we got inside, they had greeters at the door, and it was all very friendly. Come on in. And we get inside, and it is like a theater. It's pitch black, and they've got a worship video going on. And at exactly 10:30 or whatever time the service started, up popped this perky young gal and said, "Are y'all ready to worship Jesus?" And she was so enthusiastic, and they had a live band and started singing. It was all, it was good, okay, but it was a show. The volume was so high, I could not hear myself singing. And whether I was worshiping or not made absolutely no difference, okay? Because it looked pretty much like this. Lots of lights. I think they even had some theatrical smoke. It was a big production, okay? Well, pretty soon that was over, and they had a video about some missions project, and the local pastor stood up and said something, and they had it all perfectly timed, and then the lights went back down, and up popped on 3 jumbotrons the lead pastor. They never said his name. They never said where he was. And he gave a pretty good sermon. It was biblical. It was interesting. He had lots of jokes. He had YouTube clips in it. It was very entertaining. And Harry leaned over to me and said, "Hey, we should come back to this church sometime," because the sermon was fun, okay? And then he was finished, and the local pastor came back up and gave an invitation, and then said, "Great, we'll see y'all next week." And the lights came up, and everybody walked out, and no one spoke to us. Not a single person. Okay. Well, that afternoon, I got a phone call. I'd filled out a visitor's card, and it was somebody on the staff of the church to say hi, thanks for coming, hope you'll come back. And she asked a question that I had never, ever been asked before by anyone from any church I'd ever been to. She said, was there anything that made you uncomfortable or that you didn't like about the church? And I said to her, well, actually, there were two things. The first one was that you only had the music at 200 decibels. I think you should turn it up to 300 just in case anyone who's actually deaf comes so they could hear it too. She laughed and said, okay, yes, it is loud, I know. And I said, and then there's one other thing. And I told her the story about no one speaking to us. And I said to her, I don't go to church for good worship or for a good sermon. I can get better music on YouTube anytime, okay? And I can get a better sermon on YouTube most of the time. I go to church for relationships because I need people in my life. People who can bless me, people who can correct me, people who can hold me up when I've got a problem. And I can't get that from YouTube. And I can't get it from your church either because nobody talked to me. And she said, oh, I'm sorry. And I was waiting for her to say, but we have small groups and that's where we relate to people. But she didn't because they didn't. I hope I misinterpreted the situation, but the way I interpreted it was this. Our market niche, the people we're aiming for in this church, is the people who want no commitment and no interaction. Millennials, but older people too. People who want to come to church to assuage their guilty religious feeling about not going to church, but boy, they don't want to have to deal with people. It's just between them and God, and that's it. Well, in my opinion, you might as well stay home and watch YouTube if you're not going to interact with people. Okay? Seriously, I like to worship at home. I put on the songs I like. I don't have to listen to the ones I don't, and I can enter into God's presence just fine without other people. I think it's better when I'm with other people, but I can do it without them, okay? But I cannot get anyone who's going to give me a hug or pray for me or be with me from the computer or the television, okay? And that's why we need Christian community. We need each other. Mm-hmm. Okay, Karen, let's go on to the next one. Here's my key verse for today. I love this in the easy-to-read translation. So, love each other deeply with all your heart. Harry and I make a point of memorizing Scripture from time to time, and this is a verse that he picked out for us not too long ago. And I thought, what a wonderful verse. And it's even more clear in the message. Love one another as if your lives depended on it. Wow, what does that mean? That the most important thing is to love each other. There's another verse, I didn't put it on the screen here, that says that God has already taught you how to love each other. And that needs to come true in our lives. That we need to be listening to the Holy Spirit of what can we do to love each other, not just in theory, not just in our heads, or not even just in our hearts, but in our actions and words and attitudes. How can we not only love one another, but show each other that we love each other? Okay. Let's go on to the next verse, Karen. I came up with about 50 verses on this theme as I was preparing this message, but I've just got 4 or 5 of them here to show you. Romans 12:10, be devoted to one another in love. Honor one another above yourselves. Serve one another humbly in love. I understand the word serve to mean do something practical that the person needs. Okay? Go ahead. Encourage one another daily. Key word there, daily. And spur one another on toward love and good deeds. Go ahead. So, think about this. Love each other deeply, be devoted to one another, honor one another, encourage one another daily, and spur one another on toward love and good deeds. What do those things have in common? You can't do them if you're only seeing each other on Sunday mornings. If this is only a Sunday morning religious ritual for you, I guarantee you, you are not obeying those commands. Okay? We have to be in contact with each other during the week between church meetings. If we're only doing official activities, we are missing it. The official activities are good. Even the home groups are a step in the right direction and are great. But we need more than that. We need one-on-one contact. And of course, I can't be really good friends with everybody here, but I can be with a few, and you can be with a few, and between us, we should get everybody covered. Okay? Sunday morning is not enough to have Christian community. Let me tell you about an experience I had when I was in college, or in graduate school, actually. I was living in an apartment complex, and there were several other friends in that same complex and another one right next to us. And we were physically close. This is what I looked like when I was in college. Of course, none of us had spouses and kids and all the obligations we have now. But we were busy. We were in school, and many of us were working and paying bills and stuff. So we were busy. But we had such a friendship between us that there was constant, spontaneous interaction, that we could drop by and say hi. Or I remember one evening a gal came over with a roll of cookie dough and put it in my oven, and we called a couple of the guys from upstairs, and we had a spontaneous prayer meeting and ate cookies. Okay? We were involved in each other's lives. And it was a wonderful, wonderful experience. We were able to encourage each other, not just in spiritual things, but also in daily living. And yes, you can pass that test, and things like that. So that was an ideal type of Christian community. We didn't actually have to be in a commune and have a common purse and all the things people talk about, but we were sharing our lives. So I ask you, how come we don't have that kind of shared lives now? Well, there are some obstacles. Go ahead, Karen. The biggest one is with this illustration right here. Hello, my name is I am busy. And believe me, I understand this. I'm busy too. Besides the wife and the kids and going to soccer games and grocery shopping and picking up the dry cleaning and cleaning the house and cutting the grass, and it never ends. Try to have a little bit of time for myself once in a while. I like to read, and when can I ever read a book? Well, it's hard to find some time. Nowadays, I put them on my Kindle, and after Luz Mari falls asleep, then I turn it on with the black background so I won't wake her up, and I can read for a few minutes, but it takes me about 3 minutes when I'm already laying in bed before I'm out, so that doesn't work very well. We're busy. I get it. Then there's another problem. In the case of this particular church, we are geographically spread out. We've got people all over, a long way apart. And it's not convenient to just drop by and have a cup of coffee. But if we decide, this is important, I'm going to reach out first. Another very important thing Terry said was to get over the hurts. One of the verses I didn't include in the list here was about being kind and tender-hearted to one another and forgiving one another. There's nobody in any church who's never been offended by no one, okay? We've all had stuff we have to get over. And we just need to get over it and move on and learn to be like Jesus, to forgive first rather than waiting for the person to come to me and say, I was wrong, would you please forgive me? Most of the time that is not going to happen. And you can sit there and hold on to your unforgiveness till you die, and it won't do you a bit of good. Or you can choose to follow Jesus' example and forgive first. And we just need to get on and say, obeying God and having a community, those things are more important to me than being right and having them tell me they were wrong. Okay? We just need to decide. Go ahead, Karen. I think the biggest obstacle of all to Christian community is the lack of conviction on our part that it's that important. Most of us have come from some kind of evangelical background where we've been in church for years and years, and we've got a model of going to church on Sunday morning and maybe to an adult Sunday school class, maybe to a cell group, so we've got some interaction going on in our lives. But our main social interactions are with our neighbors or co-workers or extended family, and we're not principally involved in community through church. So we don't have the conviction that Christian community is really, really important. And until we have that conviction, we're not going to change. It's like anything else. If somebody wants to quit smoking, until they decide they really want to, no program is going to help them. In the same way with any other change in our lives, until God convicts our hearts that we need to change, we're probably not going to change. I'll tell you a quick story. Long before I met Luz Mari, I was living in Italy at the time, and there was a girl I had my eye on. And we were friends, and I would talk to her. She was going to a different church. The church she was going to was on the border of being abusive. They had so many activities and gave the people who were willing to be workers so many responsibilities. Well, I asked her out, and she said, I would love to go out with you, but I've got to do this in the church on Monday, this other thing in the church on Tuesday, I have this church activity on Wednesday, and there was something else Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Well, I was very good friends with the pastor of that church, so I met with her, and I said, listen, I wanted to ask this girl out, and she says that you've got her working 7 days out of 7. Is that really true? And the pastor said to me, well, yes, but if she wanted to go out with you, she'd make time for you. I realized, oh, that's the real problem. She doesn't want to go out with me. And she's not honest enough to say that, okay? I think it's the same way with Christian community. We can say we're busy, but don't we usually find time for the things that are important, okay? Most of the time, don't we make it to our kid's birthday party, okay? Most of the time, don't we manage to clear our schedule to watch the last game of the World Series? Things that are important, we usually find time for. And if we would decide, God has called me to Christian community, we'd make time for it. Thank you. Go ahead, the next one, Karen. Just 3 quick reasons why community is important. We see the figure here of this guy giving himself a group hug. How effective is that? Not really, okay? There's some things that we can fake it by ourselves, but we can't really do it, okay? And being part of community is one of them. Here's 3 specific benefits. When something good happens, you're not alone. Anything that's good in your life is better if you can share it, okay? I bought a new car recently, and I couldn't wait to show it to people because it was more fun to talk to people about it than show it off, okay? If you go to a movie, the movie's just as funny, you watch it by yourself, but do you enjoy it as much? Probably not. When I go to a movie, I like to be with somebody, and then we can talk about it afterwards and remember the parts that we liked, and it's so much more of a complete and positive experience. Same way with anything good in our lives. If we have other people in our lives who are important to share those things with, they're better. And the opposite is true too. When bad stuff happens, if you've got a community to support you and to help you and to share that burden, it really is better. Okay? And then in this world, we're going to get attacked sometimes. Most of the time when the devil attacks us, he uses other people. Okay? And it's good to have somebody who's got your back. Being in full-time Christian ministry for 20-something years now, I've had my share of attacks. A few of the times I was actually guilty and it was something I brought on myself. Most of the time it was not. But that didn't matter. What mattered was that I had people who were supporting me. And whether I was right or wrong, they were going to help me get through that situation and pick myself up and go on. I'll never forget one time there was a particular attack, and Dennis said to me, "Jay, the devil is who's putting condemnation on you. Jesus died to get it off of you." And that meant so much to me in that particular situation. These three things don't happen if we don't have community. You can give yourself that group hug all day long, and it's just not the same as when there's somebody else whose arms you can feel. Okay. Go ahead, Karen. So, how can we do this better? How can we strengthen our relationship as a community? How can we learn to love each other deeply? Well, the first thing I'd suggest is we need to reread the New Testament, especially the book of Acts, but also all the letters of Paul. He goes on and on about relationships and gives suggestions and commands about how we need to be relating to people. And I think until we get that New Testament vision and see how far short of it we are, we're going to be satisfied with where we are. And God doesn't want us to be satisfied. He's calling us to something higher up and further in, something better. So I would encourage you, read the New Testament, look at the kind of community they had, and say, how can we get there? Because what we've got is good, but God's got something better. Okay? And secondly, this is just like the gifts of the Holy Spirit. Okay? Until you set your heart on what God has for you, you're not going to get it. He is not just going to drop it in your lap. He's not going to force it down your throat. You have to reach out and say, God, I need this. I want it. It's important. And only you can give it to me. Only you can help me do this. So those are the two most important things we can do, is to become unsatisfied with what we've got, realizing that God has more, and then to ask God to give us that more that He has.